Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Can Hekkie Budler on Monday afternoon in our time here in South Africa, in Tokyo, Japan, once again become a unified junior flyweight champion of the world and become the only South African to become a two-time ring champion? That is the million-dollar question when he steps into the ring against Kenshiro Teraji. Would you like to know how I break down the fight and share your opinion in the comment section? Then stick around. Like most South African fighters travelling abroad, Hekkie Budler is once again up against it, but he is a fighter who can win and sometimes lose on the road. So, will he be able to pull it off against the Japanese star Kenshiro Teraji in Tokyo? It's a hard question. He's a big underdog in the rest of the world. Most people expect him to get stopped late in the fight. But we in South Africa, we know him, and I know Hekkie as well as I know any local fighter here in South Africa. And it's a very hard job to do because I'm South African. You get to know the fighters. You want them to win so badly. But I want to stay as objective as I can. And that is sometimes hard. And if it's a guy like Hekkie Budler, who outside of the ring is one of the nicest, most humble people you'll ever meet, the job becomes even harder. But I'm going to try my best to call it down the middle. Now, I've spoken to his trainer, Colin Nathan. We speak every now and then. And like most manager trainers, Colin is very confident. All of them are confident. Sometimes it's just pre-fight bluster. They're talking up a guy, they're talking up the fight. But Colin is not like that. He is the kind of guy who is confident in his fighters, but he'll also give you an honest assessment of a situation. And he'll tell you things like, the odds are stacked against us, we're up against it, we'll see how it goes, and whatever. But he is supremely confident, even for him, about Hekkie Budler's chances Monday in Japan against Kenshiro. And in our conversation, he often mentioned the old adage, styles make fights. He's got Kenshiro's number, and they've got the strategy to beat Kenshiro. Now, that is true, and I'm thinking back a lot now about years ago. One of my favorite local fighters, Sugarboy Malinga, Tulani Sugarboy Malinga, went out to fight Nigel Benn. His listed age was 37, and later it turned out he was actually just over 40 years old, and he pulled a massive upset and took the world title from Nigel Benn in the UK. Now, in that fight, it was in the period when I wasn't blogging or YouTubing. I don't think it was even such a big thing then. But in that scenario, I picked Sugarboy Malinga to beat Nigel Benn. And the reason I did that was styles make fights. And Nigel Benn and Sugarboy Malinga have met before in a non-title fight. And Ben was given the fight by the referee by half a point, that UK scoring system. And Malinga was robbed in that fight. He clearly beat Nigel Benn. And I knew that Sugarboy Malinga had Nigel Benn's number. It's easier they have fought each other before. And I knew Sugarboy Malinga does well with guys that brawl and comes towards him. Pressure fighters, he does well against those. And I thought the timing was right, and I was right. Malinga beat Nigel Benn. Now forward to Hekkie Budler. Now Hekkie is 35, which is nothing for a heavyweight, but it is old for a junior flyweight, certainly. Kenshiro is 31, just by the way. He's not an absolute spring chicken either. And he is travelling to Japan. And Colin says styles make fights. They've got the beating of Kenshiro, and they've got the strategy to beat him. Now, you will need the strategy, the right strategy to beat Kenshiro. You will need maybe a backup strategy as well. And I'm 100% sure that they will have that. Then you need to be able to apply the strategy. And like Colin always says, once again, Hekkie is a fighter that listens. And he is. Now, one thing about Hekkie Budler, he can take a game plan and he can apply that game plan, and he can beat a fighter that's maybe a bit more talented, almost always harder hitting and stronger than him. So Hekkie can do that psychologically, mentally. He's got the discipline to do that. Can he still do it at the age of 35 with a lot of start-stops to his career? That is another question. Now, we all know Hekkie Budler in South Africa. For you guys listening overseas, he is a former WBA strawweight champion, and he's also unified WBA, IBF and Ring Magazine junior flyweight champion. He pulled a big upset 5 years ago in Japan in 2018, went there, beat Ryoichi Taguchi on a one-pointer, on a close decision in a very exciting fight. And I picked him to beat Ryoichi Taguchi because, once again, styles make fights. And Ryoichi Taguchi, I thought, was a guy that would suit Hekkie's style. And what will suit Hekkie's style? If you look at Hekkie Budler, the come forward pressure guys that pushes him, that has a more fighting style, and that puts him under pressure and comes forward and moves him back and bullies him, that gives him trouble. He lost his WBA strawweight title to Byron Rojas. He lost his unified junior flyweight title in Japan to Ryoto Kyoguchi. After he was pulled out after the 10th round, but he lost by TKO. And he in one of his big wins, he won that by only a split decision against Nkosi Joy. Even though he won, Nkosi Joy gave him a lot of problems because he's a come forward pressure fighter. Now, Kenshiro isn't that. He's seen more as a boxer. He likes to uses his feet, he uses his hand speed, good feet on him, and he bounces in and out. He attacks in short spurts, and then when he hurts his guy, he goes for a kill. But I would argue that he's also a boxer puncher. Now, he's got a record of 21-1, 13 knockouts. It's not such a hell of a knockout ratio, but it's a knockout ratio nonetheless. I would argue he's a boxer puncher. He's improved his. I've watched several of his fights over the years. He has shown improvement, and he gets the power behind that right hand by moving in with his feet. He's out here, and then he comes forward, jab, jab, and he comes forward as he throws the right hand and puts extra sauce on that right hand. So that is his money punch. Now, he's got some obvious flaws. Now, I can see what Colin and Hekkie are seeing in Kenshiro. The number one thing is he takes right hands. He eats them like sweets. And he doesn't mind taking a few to dish a few. So he does get caught. His hands are all over the place. His elbows are up. There's gaps here to the body. He uses his feet, basically. So his defense with his gloves really isn't great. He takes shots as he comes in. And that is a weakness of him. He is reasonably predictable because what he does is he circles around you. He pops a jab. He's got a sort of a almost Mayweather technique in his jab, in the fact that he doesn't start the jab from here, it's out there, and then he pops it from there, with the elbow partially extended, so it's a sort of distance for a punch to travel, and he'll get you easier if you're quicker than him with that sort of jab. And then he comes in with a straight right hand. He also has a very good sweeping left hook. So that's what he does. He'll circle, 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 jab, jab, jab. Once he gets his rhythm going, he'll attack in a spurt. If he feels he's hurt you, then he'll start slugging it out with you. Now, that is his style. So it is kind of what he does. It's that two styles of fighting: circle, jab, attack in spurts, and then slug it out when he feels comfortable doing it. He can fight those two styles, but he takes punches. There's a predictability sometimes to what he does. He takes right hands. Those are some of the weaknesses. And then a couple of fights ago, he lost for the first time to a complete underdog, his countryman Masamichi Yabuki. He got stopped. He said afterwards it's because he came back too soon after having COVID. Now, he proved that wasn't an excuse. He proved that was in fact reality. Took an immediate rematch and completely wiped Yabuki out of the ring and stopped him in 3 rounds. So I think that is something that can also give a Budler camp hope, but I would take that Yabuki defeat and put it in the trash can, because he's proved clearly he wasn't right on that night that he lost to Yabuki. Now, the other thing that the Budler camp can draw a lot of confidence from is his last fight. He was going to fight a unification against WBO champion Gonzalez. Gonzalez got injured or got sick, and he had a 5-0 fighter, Anthony Olasquaga, instead. Now this is a guy who was 5-0 as a pro, one of these that's been, not Mayweather, that's been sort of Lomachenko, the long fast track in his pro career. And Olasquaga bounced a lot of shots on Kenshiro. He made Shiro eat right hands, he hit him with left hooks, until eventually Shiro stayed in the pocket of him, slugged it out, and stopped him in the 9th round in spectacular session. But up until then, Kenshiro looked terrible. Now, that is the thing that the Budler fight camp can take interest in. So, what must Hekkie Budler do to win this fight? Now, I think the number one thing with Kenshiro, you've got to take away his jab. That popping jab, if he gets a rhythm, if he starts finding the target of that jab, the right hand is coming. If he needs to sweep you with a left hook, he will, but the right hand is inevitably going to come, and it's going to come quick, sort of like a baseball slide, almost like that. And that is what they have to watch for. They've got to negate the jab. They've got to move out of the way of that right hand. Another thing about Kenshiro, he's got a bad habit of jumping in a straight line and jumping out in a straight line, almost like a fencer, like that. He comes in a straight line and out in a straight line. He's doing a lot less of it than he used to. He now gets on his bicycle and circles a bit. He used to do it a lot more like that, but he still does it. So when he jumps in, you can time him with a counter. When he jumps out, you can go with him and keep a distance out. But so far, Shiro is a master of controlling the distance. I've seen in one of his most impressive fights when he unified his WBC title with the WBA title and picked up the ring belt as well. So when he stopped the guy who beat Hekkie, which is Hiroto Kyoguchi. Now, he knocked Kyoguchi down with the right hand, started slugging of him. Bad mistake. Kyoguchi came back and hurt Shiro. Shiro regrouped, got the distance again. Right? So he managed to get out of that and then control the distance again. And then he stopped Hiroto Kyoguchi with that same right hand. So Kenshiro, you would make a mistake to think he can't punch. He can definitely punch. So as if I compare him to Ryoichi Taguchi, whom Hekkie beat, Taguchi wasn't a puncher. He wasn't a dangerous puncher. Kenshiro is. He may not have as many knockouts, but he can definitely crack. So that's what I think Hekkie's got to do. Negate the right hand, negate the jab, counter him as he comes in, throw those right hands down the pipe. He's not going to miss Shiro with these. Kenshiro is taller than Hekkie, but what I've noticed is Hekkie has got, if BoxRec is anything to go by, 1.5 inches on reach. So it's not difficult to find Kenshiro, and I think Hekkie is going to find him a bit better because Kenshiro might underestimate the reach there that Budler's got. So that's what I think Hekkie Budler must do. Now, as for Kenshiro, what we've seen with Hekkie Budler, he does well against boxers. If Shiro is going to circle and attack in spurts, I think if Hekkie is on his P's and Q's, there's a very good chance that Hekkie beats Kenshiro if he fights his usual style and he keeps with it through the fight. But I think what Shiro has to do, he's got to take a few to land a few, like he is often willing to do. He's got to go like he did after he knocked down Kyoguchi, but Kyoguchi hurt him. But I don't think Budler can hurt him really. So I think Kenshiro has got to, if his usual style doesn't work, and I'm thinking it's not going to, then he's got to go closer distance. He's got to slug it out with Budler. And once it's in that protracted exchange, even if it goes 12 rounds, he's stronger. He's going to land the more eye-catching shots, and he'll win it on points. And that is how I see it. Now, if we look at Hekkie Budler, I will not be shocked if he pulls off his upset. It will be a big upset. It won't shock me. I'll be elated, and I will be, I can't even say mildly surprised. I'll be a little bit maybe surprised, but I won't be shocked if Hekkie pulls it off against Kenshiro. Kenshiro has got these obvious flaws, but he also has these things that he does very, very well. And I also think Kenshiro is a guy who fights down to the level of his opposition. Against Masamichi Yabuki, the first fight, and obviously the COVID had something to do with it, and in his last fight against Olasquaga, definitely looked terrible. So he fights down to his level of opposition. So if he underestimates Hekkie, he's going to be in big trouble. But the Japanese are a strong boxing nation. I don't think he's going to underestimate Hekkie. He'll be very stupid to do that. I think he rates Hekkie. I think he'll be on his P's and Q's. You're not going to see the Shiro that you saw against Olasquaga. Now, I think Kenshiro will be on his P's and Q's for this. and he will definitely take the fight very seriously. Now, if we compare, Hekkie is an older fighter for a small guy, but if we look at him after losing his fight title to Hiroto Kyoguchi, there was a fight against Jonathan Almason, a Filipino, that's levels removed. And then in Mexico, we fought Elwin Soto. It was a fight no one really expected him to win, the ex-WBO champion. He put on a boxing clinic in the second half of a fight, and he scored a knockdown, and he won a close decision. I think the decision was, in my eyes, a little bit wider, but looking at it again, I can see it was closer with close rounds. But Hekkie put on a brilliant performance against Elwin Soto, and since then, he's only had less than a round of action when he knocked out overmatched Thai fighter in a spectacular left hook to a body, left hook to a top knockout. He did what he was supposed to do with that guy. But he hasn't got a lot of rounds. So it's not a whole lot to go by. And he's apparently looking great in the gym. I don't have access to that. I don't stay in Joburg. Some of my friends who do have told me Hekkie looks good in the gym. He looks like he's punching with more authority. And often fighters look great in the gym, and then it doesn't translate in the ring. Sometimes they do look great in the gym and they translate in the ring. Now, a friend of mine, Jeff Ellis, we were talking about fights, and two different fights of different kind of fighters. He was watching them in the gym, and he picked the opposite side that I picked, and each time he was right. So sometimes you can tell in the gym. So if you're a gambling man, which I'm not, I think it might be a good idea to put a few shekels on Hekkie pulling it off. But I'm not a gambling man. I'm analyzing the fight now. I've told you how I think Hekkie Budler can win the fight. I told you how I think Kenshiro can win the fight. If I compare them where they're at in their careers, the momentum is behind Kenshiro. He won the WBC title years ago. He made 8 successful defenses of that belt. He's not a guy who's just recently had the belt. Lost it to Yabuki, regained it from Yabuki, unified it with Hiroto Kyoguchi. That was a very impressive performance. That was an elite level performance. And he's now the defending unified WBC, WBA and the Ring Magazine champion. So if I compare their performances on a world level, all right, they've got some common opponents. You know, they have Hiroto Kyoguchi who stopped Hekkie in the corner, and Shiro knocked him out. We've got Milan Melindo, whom Hekkie lost a split decision to and was robbed of a cut victory. They let people work on Melindo's cut in the middle of a round. So he was robbed of a cut victory, but it was a very close fight. So too did Kenshiro. He stopped Melindo on cuts in 7 rounds, but up to that point he was beating up Melindo. He was more dominant than Hekkie. Now, styles make fights, and you can't make these comparisons because fighter A beats fighter B and fighter C loses to fighter B. It means that A necessarily beats C, because styles do make fights, like with the Malinga Ben analogy. But if you can take common performances, several of them, or performances at the top level of boxing, and you can compare those bodies of performances, and you can see maybe what the level of a fighter is also. Now, Hekkie Budler is technically more sound. I think he's maybe more versatile. He's a better boxer than Kenshiro is. But if I look at Shiro, he finds a way to win with his flaws. And there's been many great fighters with flaws, even Muhammad Ali, Naseem Mohammed, that go through their flaws and they do other things so well that they find a way to win. And if you look at Kenshiro's performances on the top level, he is more dominant than Hekkie Budler. Hekkie, you know, he got by Nkosi Nati-Joy, he got by Ryoichi Taguchi in his best wins. And yes, Kenshiro is a style that suits Hekkie Budler much more so than Hiroto Kyoguchi did. But if we look on that level, on the world level, Kenshiro has been just more dominant. Now, could it be Sugar Boy Malinga, Nigel Benn? Nigel Benn had a much better career than Sugar Boy Malinga had, but he could never beat Sugar Boy Malinga. Could it be something like this? Quite possibly. Does Hekkie still have the reflexes to stay out of that right hand and apply the right strategy that I know will have? Will he physically be able to pull it through for 12 rounds? We don't know. That's why we watch the fights. So my gut feel, I'm a big Hekkie Budler supporter. I love a guy. I handed the first ring belt over to him. If there's a second ring belt, ideally want to hand that belt over to him as well. That will be another great moment in South African history, and he's got my full support. I really hope he pulls it off. I do think he's got a great shot. What I think is going to happen in the fight, and I hope I'm wrong, I think Hekkie's going to give Kenshiro a lot of problems. He's going to have a game plan. Shiro's initial boxing isn't going to work. And I think Hekkie will win the early rounds against Kenshiro. And I think Shiro will have to adjust. And Shiro has shown that he can fight a different style. And I think when Shiro adjusts, he's going to start doing like Byron Rojas did. He's going to swarm him and he's going to try and overwhelm him. And that's going to be enough as the fight goes on to win a close decision. So my pick is Kenshiro by close decision. I hope I'm wrong. I think Hekkie Budler's got a great chance here. I'm just thinking the momentum is on Kenshiro. There's too little that I've seen from Hekkie Budler in the last few years. He's had a great performance against Alvin Soto, but Kenshiro is a better fighter than Alvin Soto. Soto was a guy who briefly had a world title belt. So I'm going to go for Kenshiro on a hard-fought decision. I'll be watching. Hekkie, prove me wrong. Beat this Japanese guy. Bring home the belts, and I can hand you a new ring belt if you're not too angry about my prediction, but I know Hekkie, he won't be. And that's what I think. Guys, in the comment section, please tell me what you think. How do you see Kenshiro Hekkie Budler going down? I always like to interact with you. And until we see each other again, remember to keep those hands up.